let's talk about Essex Man, because Tom, you've spotted something of a trend. I mean, it started off with Rylan Clark, former X Factor contestant turned, I guess, TV presenter. He was on This Morning, making vaguely sensible noises about illegal migration. We've had the Epping protests, of course, with men and women there protesting against illegal migration. We have the ubiquitous Tom Skinner, former Apprentice star, always popping up, promising or potentially pledging to run for mayor of London. So is Essex Man our saviour, potentially, Tom? Can he save Britain?
That was the
Essex Man and woman, I should say.
That was the tweet which became a piece, as is often the way these days. If anything is to constitute a trend in journalistic terms, you just need to have 3 examples. So we've got that, so we can make this point. But I think it is interesting. I mean, to see
the public are really seeing behind how the sausage is made.
No, exactly. I don't want to betray all of these trade secrets. I actually thought the Rylan Clark thing on This Morning was actually really interesting because it was odd. I mean, I agreed with him. He basically was just saying very commonsensical things about how, you know, legal migrants contribute loads to the economy, but this illegal migration situation is bonkers. We've got so many people who've lived in this country their whole lives who are struggling, and yet we're putting them up in hotels. He made a point of saying that whilst not all of them are wrong-uns, some of them are going to be wrong-uns if you don't know who they are and what they're capable of. It's entirely kind of commonsensical, reasonable points, but it was, like I say, oddly bracing to see it expressed on morning television. And it does feel like it's of a piece. When Tom Skinner was announced as one of the contestants on Strictly Come Dancing, this was written up in places like the Metro and the Independent as variously divisive and scary. Because of the fact that, as well as formerly being on The Apprentice and being a former market trader and an entrepreneur and so on, and a social media influencer, he quite likes Donald Trump. He's met JD Vance. He has the views of someone who grew up in Romford, you know? And yet this was treated as so bizarre, so aberrant. Why would you have someone like this on the television, whilst everyone else was thinking, oh, he's funny, I like him, this will be a good series. So that was very clear. And then, of course, in the context of the Epping protests, which were, you know, have really dealt the most significant blow to our completely dysfunctional asylum system single-handedly in the space of quite a short space of time, as we've been talking about. There is an argument that essentially Essex, given half the chance, could save the country. I think it's fair to say. But also I think it's interesting as well, just in terms of the kind of period that we've been going through, particularly post-Brexit, the significance of Essex in that is also worth remembering. It was, of course, Clacton, which re-elected Douglas Carswell when he defected from the Conservatives to UKIP in 2014. Tendring, which is the district which Clacton sits in, registered a Leave vote of about 70%. And of course, that town of Clacton-on-Sea is now represented by one Nigel Farage. So if you connect a bunch of dots, I think there's a good case to be made that whether it's pushing back against the kind of crazy ideologies of the elites or just being a kind of tonic and an antidote to the stifling politically correct turn of culture, then a lot of the Essex influences are pretty significant in that way, I would say.
Yes, yeah. I think also the thing to remember is that they're kind of the displaced Londoners of the 50s, 60s, you know. That is who these people are. I mean, I grew up in Buckinghamshire, which sounds posh, but not the bit I was in. And a lot of the people there were similarly displaced from London in the 50s and 60s, including my parents. Who, I mean, they had a sort of mongrel background, but they settled in London and then they moved out to have the kids. So it's a kind of milieu that I'm quite familiar with. And I think, well, there's always the danger of sort of lionizing groups of people. But at the same time, there is, and I'm not just saying this because it's kind of the kind of people I knew as I was growing up, but there is a kind of very basic level of practical, pragmatic living sense about these people. I mean, I thought what Rylan said yesterday was just sort of absolutely down the line, on the nose. You know, as Tom was saying, it wasn't extreme, it wasn't unusual. The strange thing about it was on ITV in 2025, where you thought we'd never see that again. It was quite funny because Camilla Tominey was in there, and she actually, because she's a GB News person, but her face was kind of like, oh my God, where's he going? Which I thought was quite funny. It was like, oh, made me maybe quite nervous as well. But it was, it wasn't an unusual thing. It was just basically bloody obvious stuff. But the basically bloody obvious is now extremely contentious. I did like, because I flicked down the replies after Ryland's statement yesterday afternoon. And there was some sort of impotently railing person going, well, you've lost all your listeners on radio too, I can assure you. And I should be writing to the BBC. And I thought, oh, you think it's still 2017, don't you? You think, you think it's still then and you can do this, and you can't anymore. And I think Ryland saying that was a very good bellwether, if you like, for how the conversation has changed. Because in a weird way, because he's quite an odd person, he's kind of an everyman as well. There's something quite blokish about him. Despite the fact that he's, a camp gay man, supposedly. But, there's a bit of Essex lad in him as well. And I think that gives him a kind of weather vane quality. And I think we saw that yesterday.
And of course, Tom, these are the people who our betters, our overclass look upon with absolute horror, shouldn't be listened to, neither seen nor heard. Even though, parts of Essex and Epping in particular, we've been talking a lot about, is not a poor place by any stretch of the imagination, but culturally they are very much looked down upon and dismissed and sneered at.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, the sort of Brexit coalition, the sorts of voters who put Boris Johnson in power in 2019, the people who are now turning towards reform, that movement, that sentiment, that body of people, it's quite well reflected in somewhere like Essex, insofar as, yes, there's a class dimension to it, absolutely. Certainly, in places like Clacton's got some of the most impoverished communities in the country, places like Jaywick. But it's also cultural. It's lower middle class. It's working class done good. It's people who often, even if they've made money, they didn't go to university, so they haven't gone through the sort of indoctrination factory on so many of these different issues. They haven't been trained to ignore the evidence of their own eyes on immigration or integration or whatever it may be. Yeah. So it's a reminder that there is an element, there is clearly a kind of class element to so much of the political divide that exists at the moment, but it's also fundamentally about culture and values. And I think Essex is a kind of interesting, useful proxy for that in some respects, at least in terms of some of the people that we're talking about.